The text came in at 6:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Important family meeting over dinner at 7. Be there. No please, no how are you. No acknowledgement that just 48 hours earlier my face had been on the cover of Forbes, above a headline reading, Silent Empire, the 100 million hotel dynasty nobody saw coming. I stared at my phone for a long moment. Then I typed back 3 words, I'll be there. But they had no idea what I was bringing with me, 8 years earlier. The day I graduated with my hospitality management degree, my father grilled steaks, not for me. He'd forgotten the date entirely. I sat in the auditorium in my cap and gown, scanning the crowd until I stopped scanning. My mother was at my sister Brianna's volleyball tournament 3 states away. My brother Derek was at a networking event, which I later learned was a golf weekend. When I called my dad afterward, he said, "Oh, that was today? I thought it was next week. Hey, did you see the game last night?" I drove home alone, ate leftover Chinese food, applied for a job at a budget hotel in Cincinnati. That was their first mistake, leaving me entirely to myself. Here's what my family believed about me, stated plainly and often. I was the quiet one, the forgettable one. Brianna was the athlete. Derek was the entrepreneur, a word they used loosely, since his 3 businesses had all failed by the time he was 30. I was the one who'd chosen a glorified bellhop degree, as my Uncle Russ called it at Thanksgiving one year, to laughter. I smiled at that joke. I remember it specifically. What nobody knew was that I'd been saving since I was 19. Not spending money on cars or clothes or the golf weekends Derek loved. I lived in a studio apartment until I was 26. I read every book I could find on real estate, hospitality finance, and distressed property acquisition. I had a mentor, a retired hotel developer named Clarence, who I'd met by cold emailing him after reading a profile in a trade magazine. Clarence taught me one thing above everything else. The best time to buy a property is when everyone else thinks it's worthless. I took that seriously. The first property was a 12-room roadside motel in rural Ohio that had been foreclosed on twice. I bought it for $180,000 using savings, a small loan, and money I'd made consulting for larger hotel groups on the side. Nobody in my family knew. Why would I tell them? They didn't ask what I was doing. At Christmas that year, my dad spent 45 minutes explaining Derek's newest venture, a subscription box for men's grooming products, to the entire table. He asked for investors. 3 uncles wrote checks. Nobody asked me a single question about my life. I renovated the motel over 18 months, learned plumbing because I couldn't afford a plumber, painted every room myself, launched it under a brand name I'd designed, Meridian Properties, that sounded bigger than it was. It sold out its first summer, then the next. I used the revenue to buy a second property, then a third. Remember that name, Meridian Properties. It matters later. By year 4, I had 11 properties across 5 states. I'd brought in 2 partners, quiet, serious people who didn't need recognition. We structured everything under a holding company. I was listed in incorporation documents under my middle name and a hyphenated surname I'd started using professionally. My family still thought I managed a hotel in Cincinnati. At my cousin's wedding, my Aunt Patricia asked if I'd ever thought about doing something more with my life. My mother nodded sympathetically. My father changed the subject to Derek's new idea. An app this time. I nodded and smiled and ate my chicken. That was year 5. The Forbes article happened because a journalist spent 8 months investigating who owned Meridian Properties, which by then had acquired a historic downtown hotel in Nashville, 2 boutique properties in Charleston, and a resort in Colorado that Travel Plus Leisure had called the most quietly luxurious escape in the Rockies. The holding company structure had kept my name out of every headline, until it didn't. The journalist found me. I agreed to the profile on one condition: embargo until publication. I didn't warn my family. There was nothing to warn them about. They didn't know I had a professional life worth warning them about. The article ran on a Sunday. By Tuesday morning, my phone had received 41 messages from family members who hadn't texted me in years. By Tuesday evening, my father sent the dinner invitation. Important family meeting. 7 p.m. I arrived at my parents' house at 7:02. The whole family was there. Both parents, Derek and his wife, Brianna, Aunt Patricia and Uncle Russ, 3 cousins, 2 aunts I barely recognized. Someone had ordered catering, actual catering, not my mother's usual casserole. The table was set beautifully. They were beaming. My father stood up when I walked in. Stood up. I had never in my adult life seen him stand up when I entered a room. "There he is," he said, spreading his arms. "Our boy. Our boy." Uncle Russ clapped. Someone started to applaud. Derek was grinning in a way that didn't reach his eyes. I sat down. My father launched into a speech about family, about roots, about how success starts at home. He talked for 6 minutes. I timed it. He teared up at the end. Then Derek leaned forward. "So listen, we were thinking, family should be involved, right? We've been talking, and we think there's a real opportunity here to bring some people in, have family representation in the business. You want investment capital?" I said. Silence. "Or advisory roles," Brianna added quickly. "Consulting. We have skills that could really—" Uncle Russ called my degree a glorified bellhop degree, I said, at Thanksgiving. 2019. Everyone laughed. Aunt Patricia looked at the table. "You didn't come to my graduation," I continued. "Not one of you. I sat in that auditorium, and I looked for your faces, and they weren't there. When I called to tell Dad, he didn't remember the date. I looked at my father. You asked me if I'd seen the game." My father opened his mouth. "I'm not angry," I said, and I meant it. I made peace with this a long time ago. What I built alone. I had help from people who had no obligation to help me and chose to anyway. You had every obligation and chose not to. Derek said, "We're family." "I know," I said. "That's what makes it simple." I reached into the bag I'd brought and placed a document on the table. It was a letter from my attorney. Formal, 2 pages, outlining that Meridian Properties and its subsidiaries were privately held, that I was the majority owner, and that I had no intention of offering equity, advisory positions, or partnership arrangements to any party at this time or in the foreseeable future. I'd had it prepared that morning. The room was very quiet. "I came tonight," I said, "because you're my family, and I thought you deserved a clear answer in person rather than through a representative." I stood up. "The answer is no." I picked up my bag. "I hope dinner is good," I said. "The caterer you used does excellent work." I walked out. 6 months later, Meridian Properties completed its first international acquisition, a 19-room villa property in Portugal. The announcement ran in 4 hospitality trade publications and the Wall Street Journal's property column. My father sent a text. "Proud of you, son." I read it. I didn't respond. Clarence sent a bottle of champagne with a card that said, "You built something real. That's everything." I keep the card in my desk drawer. I don't keep score. I don't need them to suffer. I just needed them to understand, clearly and without confusion, that the quiet one had been paying attention the whole time, and building something while everyone else was looking away. The best time to buy a property is when everyone thinks it's worthless. The same is true I've found for people. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who had no idea who they were dealing with? Tell me your story in the comments. If this hit home, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications.